Welcome to Developing Programs for K-12 Students, the first in a three-part webinar series, Heritage in Action, Engaging the Next Generation Through Educational Programs and Activities. Offered by the Freedoms Way National Heritage Area, this series is designed to support cultural, environmental, and history organizations in developing and sustaining education programs for school audiences. A recommendation developed through a comprehensive assessment of the educational opportunities available to students within the 45 communities of the Heritage Area, conducted for Freedoms Way by Elizabeth Nevins of Seed Education Consulting, who's here with us today. And this recommendation came out of a management plan that we did in 2015 that we are reviewing and implementing as we go into its 10-year anniversary. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Patrice Tedisco, the Executive Director of Freedoms Way National Heritage Area. And the Heritage Area collaborates with people, organizations, and the 45 communities of the Heritage Area to facilitate and promote preservation, conservation, and educational initiatives. Our efforts inspire residents and visitors to value and engage with our landscapes, histories, and cultures, and the principles underlying freedom and democracy. The webinar that you're seeing today in this series explores strategies to engage youth, a population that is critically important to the well-being and long-term stewardship of the Heritage Area and its natural, cultural, and historical resources. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with registrants following each session. Additional educational resources will be made available on our website, and as well as templates with additional information. Each session is closed captioned. I'd like to thank our advisory committee, whose expertise and experience guided the project. We're very grateful for their support. Their names are listed here: Julie Burnson, Director of Learning at the Trustees; Carolyn Collins, Education Program Manager, Historic New England; Denise LeBlanc, Vice President and Program Chair, Friends of Pine Hawk; Catherine Parent, Program Coordinator, the Mass DCR Division of Water Supply Protection; and Hannah Wolf, Educational Coordinator, Lex Art. I will now turn it over to our speakers, Elizabeth Nevins of Seed Consultant, and Susan Dietchison, Director of Education at the Fitchburg Art Museum, who will begin by introducing themselves. Please place your questions in the chat, and they will be answered either during the presentation or at the end of the program. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say after you hear the speakers' presentations.
Thanks so much, Patrice, and welcome everyone. We're so glad you could join us this afternoon. Again, my name is Elizabeth Nevins. I'm here with Susan Diatchison from the Fitchburg Art Museum. I'm so happy to have her with me in conversation. And our topic today for this first in this series of three seminars or webinars about engaging youth is really about developing school programs for K through 12 students. When we did the research, this was definitely an topic of interest amongst many of the 200 plus organizations, heritage, conservation, and arts organizations in the heritage area. And so we're jumping right in with school programs. That's where you definitely know you can find youth. Susan, and I am a consultant. I'm a museum educator by trade. I've been doing this work for a long time, I guess I'll say, and have worked with a lot of organizations, both internally on staff and as a consultant on developing school programs. And Susan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi. Thank you very much for inviting me here with you today. My name is Susan Dietchison. I'm the Director of Education at the Fitchburg Art Museum. I've been working in museums as an educator for over 25 years, mostly art museums, but also some history museums as well, large and small museums. So I've seen it from each end. And I primarily are really focusing on education strategies, exhibitions and installations, community partnership, projects and public programming, all are which are designed to connect people through culture, through interactive experiences. So thank you for having me.
Right. So we are going to just be in conversation today. Originally I was going to be hosting, and I've had to step in and to be an expert on the topic today, which um, this is actually one of the things I feel pretty comfortable being expert in, or at least having a lot of experience in. And so the way Susan and I have really talked, we've met a bunch of times and we've chatted a lot about some of the things that we think are important to share with you in thinking about developing school programs. And we're going to kind of cycle through three main topics, which I will share with you in advance, which are relationships, practicalities, and then actual program creation, which I think perhaps you're thinking, wow, we're not getting to program creation until the end. And, this is very much a chicken and egg situation. When you agree, Susan, in terms of where you begin in terms of developing programs. And it's really about kind of sticking your toes in lots of different pools of water and getting your ducks in a row to kind of really find yourself in a place where you are actually ready to create a program. And so I definitely think one of the things we started with was as an organization, really getting clear on your motivations for developing school programs. What is it that you hope to get out of that experience? And also, um, recognizing that it's a commitment to take on this work. I don't know if you have thoughts on that at that topic. I know you've worked in a lot of different places and done school programming in many different contexts. So.
Thank you. I was going to say, I know we talked about our friends out here who have different experience with programs, and I don't know if we're going to do a poll on that, but
Yes.
certainly at Fitchburg, I inherited programs and created some programs. I've been here for 3 years, and I think the reason you're doing programs is really important. It comes down to what are you hoping to get out of it and why. So, for example, coming to Fitchburg, we have field trip programs. A lot of museums have that. We are involved with the 21st Century program with field trips and after school. We do professional development for teachers, art and social studies teachers. We have a community gallery for student exhibitions and family receptions, and we've done some public art projects. We've also, during the COVID years, really created a Fitchburg Families First program that helped with food scarcity and well-being for some special events, and then family events at museums. So I think that each one of those programs that we've done came out of a need at the schools and started with a relationship, and that contributed to the partnership that we have and why things came about. They were on very different levels depending who we were working with.
Yeah, and so I did actually get in our webinar chat. I threw a question in there. We're trying to get a sense that within our audience, we've got about 20 folks out here about kind of where you are in your planning process or in your thinking about developing school programs and specifically around what relationships you currently have with schools. And I threw some ideas out there for possible places you might find yourself, but we would love if you could throw in the chat a little bit about where you are so that we can get a little sense of the room that we can't see you, but we hopefully will see you in the chat. And it's great. Folks are throwing stuff in there. Yeah, so seeing a lot of situations where a teacher will reach out to an organization, some kind of one-off um, opportunities that you have. Also, just kind of seeing what's the possibilities are, what's really at stake in trying to take on this work, which is awesome. And I think we have a lot of thoughts about that, about what's required. I think first and foremost, certainly having a great site with great content is important, but ultimately this is about relationships. And I think Susan and I will both reiterate that again and again and again, that really what is most essential to building a successful school program is your relationships with the schools. And, I know, Susan, you in Fitchburg are pretty focused on the Fitchburg community. You probably do have folks from outside, but you really do have a local focus with your schools. Yes?
Yes, we do. And that kind of comes back to whether you're inheriting or reviving an existing program, or working to build a new program from scratch. And so I inherited, there's been a long relationship with the schools, for the Fitchburg Art Museum, and it's taken various forms over the years, from school field trips, as I said, we have after school, but also there was a museum school, and the students from the building across the street came in, and the setting of their school was in the museum. So there is a long history. But I guess I came on, post COVID, and so my perspective is what was existing, what do we want to build back up to, and what are the programs that are new, and all that, as you said, comes down to the relationships. Um, I think about it as it could, as some people are mentioning, you have programs requested, by a teacher, a certain individual teacher, but also depending on where you want to go with the program, if you want to start and build a long-term relationship with the district. So, for example, the museum that I worked at had a line item in the budget for the school field trips to come through on multiple grades, and that built up over many, many years. Here, as again, the school, Pittsburgh Public Schools had a relationship, but also just last week we met with the superintendent from Leominster to invite her to work with us to build a program with the Leominster schools, which is our sister city. So I think that um, starting where you're able to, meaning capacity wise, and we're going to get into that a little bit, but also who's right in your circle, who's the primary focus, the schools in your community. I see that some people are working with homeschoolers or different clubs, and that's another way as well to reach students. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're focusing on really working with school districts. That is its own kind of um, beautiful relationship building.
Yeah. And in many ways, as I'm thinking through what we're talking about in our outline, there's like a lot of research and pre-work that we're recommending for folks. And so one thing, I mean, and I know we have folks from towns of all different sizes and school districts of all different sizes. And so we kind of developed this list, which I'm throwing into the chat here of just all different kinds of people who are involved in a school district. It's a lot of different people. Um, and um, and all of these folks are potential avenues for building relationships. And I wouldn't at all recommend that you just pick one. I think for me, the more tendrils you have out there, the more opportunities you have to connect with people and talk with them about what you're doing, what you have, what you hope to do, is going to kind of hopefully reap benefits as you start moving forward with your planning process. I mean, one thing that I will say, teachers, school administrators are some of the busiest people in the world. And so um, it might take a minute to kind of find who your contact is and to get someone to respond to you, showing up at school committee meetings or just have knowing that one of your board members has a grandchild who attends one of the public schools, and can you find a way to chat with their teacher? These are all ways in which you're gonna kind of want to be out there, um, seeing who's there, seeing who's interested and wants to have a chat with you about your organization.
I think too, to add to that, the key thing to keep in mind is we as organizations know that we have incredible content and we want to share that, and we want, the future leaders of the community, the children, to really learn that and be invested. Um, but I think it also takes whoever the contact is that we find to really listening to them to see what they want. And, that can happen on various scales, top to bottom or grassroots, depending on who you build that relationship with. And as you noticed in that list, it could be, the Parent Teacher Association. They might have the money to pay for field trips. Or it could be the superintendent, as I mentioned, when you're reaching out to them, but they're also very busy as well. So I think that, for example, um, I inherited a program in another museum where there was a teacher that attended the museum regularly. And so when it came to saying, hey, we have this idea for a program, we called her up and said, do you want to, collaborate with us and think about a program? And that's exactly what we did. So she was the one person that helped us connect to the school district, to the schools, and that we created this collaborative program together and got funding for it and did it for several years with an additional partner. And so sometimes it could be one person that is really setting you up to do something, but also that became for them and for her school an example of the possibilities of what we could do. If we couldn't get the attention of the principal or the district, then you work with one teacher and do something. Sometimes I call it prototyping, but in this case, it turned into a lovely program that we had for a while. So it could come from anybody on the list. And it's really them being very excited about your organization, but then again, working with them to figure out like what do they need? What do the students need? What's going to make something really exciting for them so that it's not us imposing what we want to do, even though I may have had the original idea for something. It's really that relationship and the collaborative process that turned it into what was needed and what made it successful.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting for my perspective now. I've been working as a consultant for 16 years now. And actually, my very first project when I started out was someone reached out to me, a historic site, who wanted to develop a school program. And it was interesting the assumptions that I walked into that project with. And, again, it was my first one about kind of what questions I need to ask in advance. And, when I kind of showed up and was like, okay, so which schools have you talked to? And who are the teachers? And the person on staff was like, oh, we haven't actually talked to any schools yet. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's first what we're doing. That's your task number one is we need to reach out to the local school districts and see if we can find some teachers who want to participate in the development of the program because ultimately, I think we need to understand what it is teachers need. I always think of it as like we have something, which are our collections, our landscapes, our historical homes, historical artifacts, whatever they are, and then the teachers have very specific needs. And, we'll certainly talk about curriculum standards and those things later on. And so the best way to find that alignment between what you have and what teachers need and are trying to accomplish is through relationship building and really talking together with one another. And so I don't want to, I mean, many of us are in relationships perhaps, and they know that relationships are work and they require nurturing. And I'm not going to imply that like this is easy finding who it is that you need to be reaching out to. And so I think that's really why Susan, you and I really wanted to emphasize this at the beginning, that kind of getting out there, starting to talk to people is where you're going to kind of figure out what it is that you need to be doing to get K-12 students into your spaces.
And things change, right? So I think that, Um, I want to emphasize that you can work on a relationship and build it, and then the person that has been your primary contact might leave or move or go to a different place, and then you thinking, oh my goodness, who do I go to next? And so even if you're working with one person, it's important to understand who that person reports to and include them in the conversation once in a while, or bring them in for the summative or the, preliminary, where we're working on this project together. So at least there'll be some continuity. And we've certainly found that in with our organization as well. I might be the primary, but I bring my colleague, Suzanne in, and one of us will be able to pick up the pieces. And working with school districts, I think the important thing is that thinking long term, even though you might want to only start with one program and test things out, that the organizations and the school districts are going to be here longer than we are. So the goal is to maintain the relationship for the organization, depending on whatever level we start. I can also see in the chat that there's people doing wonderful programs out there. So we are certainly presenting some ideas, but I know there's a lot of great things going, and at some point we'll open up for questions or comments.
Yeah, exactly. And you sparked a thought for me, which is that I mean, and not only will our relationships change, but sometimes you have to be prepared to let a relationship die or, peter out, and that's totally okay. And I think I'm a teacher by training, and you also are a teacher by training, and teaching is quite possibly the most improvisational and flexible thing that you can do. There's nothing kind of, you're always constantly shifting and pivoting. And, I think even in a kind of in a long-term time frame, that's going to happen with your programs in terms of the curriculum might change, and what the third grade was doing, suddenly they're now doing in second grade, but second graders have different kind of developmental issues or developmental ways in which they learn. And so we might need to shift the program a little bit and change some of the activities. And so it's nice to think they can just create something and it exists, but then in reality, it's going to constantly um, be evolving, and sometimes it evolves into not being relevant anymore. And then that provides opportunities for something new, which is always wonderful as well. So
The other thing that can happen too is that you do a program with a grade or a teacher, and then other people hear about it within, the school or the district, and they say, "Oh, can you do something with us?" And you might be maxed out in your organization. So you say, "Let's put that on hold, or let's talk about that, and then try to fit it in." It's okay to do that. I mean, we want to give as much as we can, but we also know that we get burned out as well. And so that we have to say, this year we're going to focus on this. Maybe we alternate or pilot this new program, and how does that work? So I think it's also about sharing and caring for ourselves as cultural leaders in the community to make sure that we are giving the best that we can to our potential constituents.
yeah, that's great. And um, another thought that I was having, and kind of looking at the list of folks who have registered for this presentation, knowing that a lot of these folks are at either very small staffed organizations or are at completely volunteer organizations. And I think, in terms of relationship building, I think there's a kind of added element of being really clear about having a project committee who's dedicated to this, and making sure that the teachers or the school district, whoever you're communicating with, understands how you're organized and who they should be talking to, because you don't want confusion. Again, when teachers are so busy that, like, anything we can do to kind of make their lives easy, to make communication easy, is going to lead to more possible success in terms of developing these types of programs. So, um, do you have any thoughts? Because I was thinking, Susan, we can maybe throw it open to any questions for our relationship section. And if folks want to throw those in the chat, we can try to answer them before we kind of move on to our next topic that we wanted to talk about. So
I think that's a great idea.
great. I'm seeing some really great stuff that folks are involved in. That they've posted in the chat, which is really cool. And again, I'm looking at Pat and Woburn, seeing that, you've got a third grade trolley tour that happens every year. And then we've got, a teacher that, has come to you. So you have two examples of the ways in which, yeah, that's a great question. What level of school district is best to contact first? I think first of all, I don't know, Susan, my response is understanding just what the hierarchy, seeing what you can find out on your district website to kind of understand what the hierarchy is. My gut, um, mostly because I do work in social studies, but I think there are also science coordinators is looking to a curriculum coordinator, which is kind of this midpoint person. And, they may or may not be charged with teaching as well as coordinating, but this is a person who works within the district or a school coordinating the work of all the social studies learning or the science learning or the math learning that's happening in a school or sometimes a district if it's a smaller district. And sometimes I've found that person has a little more time. They're looking for these types of opportunities for their students and their teachers to participate. They're involved in professional development for the teachers. And so they kind of have their thumb on what's happening on the day-to-day school level and who's busy, who's not busy, but are also kind of tied into administration and have a closer connections to the administration as well. So my gut would be there. Seems like a good place to start, but I don't know if you have thoughts, Susan.
Well, I would agree with you certainly on one level if you're just you're approach not or just starting to approach because they're not in the classroom often teaching all day, and that is there's a timing issue with a lot of teachers. So again, I think coming back to if you're doing a cold call, I would absolutely say read the entire website so you can learn the district's mission and where the hierarchy is. If they have curriculum coordinators in social studies and unified arts or whatever, or if it's the assistant superintendent of curriculum and teaching, or before you're getting into teachers, unless you know somebody that knows a teacher and somebody from the organization. So I think there's always an inroad. But again, like I said, I just sent a note through, a trustee knew the new superintendent was having a meeting and said, "Oh, can I introduce you to the museum?" So again, it's some way to lead yourself into the district. But if you're cold calling, have no contacts, try the curriculum specialist, I would say. And maybe our guests have some other suggestions too.
Yeah, certainly. I don't know if anyone has had success. You can certainly throw that into the chat as well. Just thinking about, and I know there are power dynamics that I've come across within school districts. And, I would say, starting with a principal, it's this weird thing where you definitely want buy-in from the administration, and you want to work on that relationship, but you need a lot of trust from teachers. Teachers are asked to do a lot. And so having something handed top down to them from an admin can sometimes lead to resentment, maybe teach, oh, this other thing we have to do. And even though it's super fun because it's a museum visit or a visit to a conservation property. But so I'm always just kind of mindful and trying to figure out sometimes what those dynamics are and making sure that teachers feel respected and we recognize like, oh, I know this is extra time commitment on your part to help us with this, and we really want to make it worth your while and make it really um, align and support what it is you're doing in the classroom with your students.
And I think that's a great point. And in the chat, DCR from Quabbin Visitor Center said that they found it's best to work when there's made a contact with an individual teacher because they want this experience for their students. And that's true. But I also know that yes, that works great. And that's your buy your person has bought in and they're fantastic, but they might have to go to the principal and say, can we have the money for the field trip if the organization doesn't have funding to support that? So again, it is, you may have one contact to start with, but they also have to go through a lot to get this passed to make sure it can happen. So I think starting small, making your contact, getting people invested, and then making sure that other people that need to be involved are part of that. Teachers are so busy and they can promise a lot as we can as well, but they might not have the time either to. So let's copy so and so on the email, or can you introduce me? I think that's a good way of kind of spreading the joy so that it doesn't come at people as a surprise as well. Oh, you've been planning this program, you've worked it out for months, and now you want to do it. And, the principal turns around and says, no, we don't have the time. Or so I think, again, build your relationship, work it out. But, you know, Don't be siloed. Include, the ripple effect. Include people that would be involved. Sometimes, the bus scheduler person in our district is like the key to making it happen. If everybody's saying, I don't know if I can do this, or where's the money coming? I say, well, I can give you the money, but I don't know what to do. It's the bus person said, well, I can make this work because we're having a bus going in here this day, and they actually were key to pulling it together. So you never know. So make sure that you work with a team, even though if one person is really designing with you, that everybody that may be involved, because it is a district with a school system for sure.
That's great. And it's a really good segue into our next topic, which is practicalities, like buses. Buses. You'll hear a lot about buses. But so we're really thinking in this section about um, what your resources are. So you're building a relationship with teachers, and the district, trying to understand how things work there, what is useful to them, how things could work. But you also have to have a really good sense of what you can commit to, what you have available, and so I don't know if you want to jump in, Susan, and
Yes, and I think that comes back to something I said earlier is that you have the staff capacity and the organizational structure in place to do this program. So you may be planning something, in the education department with the teacher, with the school, and then you have to involve and work with your building person or your visitor services or your frontline staff or your security staff. Are they able to handle a certain number of students coming through? What's good for them? Can they come in early when, our museum isn't open until noon during the week, but we want to bring the students in earlier. So can they provide staff earlier to unlock the doors and turn the lights on so I'm not running around, or I was like Suzanne, my colleague, who really is doing all of this, is running around. So the the you want to think about, again, within your organization, who needs to support you so you can deliver and facilitate the best program that's possible. Um, I just want to go back to something I said earlier about maybe the principal not agreeing. One of the reasons when that happens, it might not be that they don't want the program to happen. It's that, oh, a substitute teacher needs to come in and the nurse needs to go with the school group. That means we have to have a substitute and another nurse come in to cover the teachers that aren't there, not so much as the students missing out or the students that don't bring their permission slips in and then have to, get somebody to keep an eye on them. So there are complications. And again, that's why, and as somebody said, that the principal may not pass on the information either. So again, my I learned this a long time ago. If you're dealing with administration, principals, superintendents, the administrative assistants, the secretaries, whoever is that key person at the desk working the schedule has to be copied on your emails because they're the ones that make sure things get happen. They pass on the information, whether it's to the principal, to the bus person, to the nurse. They're making sure if the teacher didn't have time that they are absolutely key, and treat them with respect because they are just as important as everybody else. Their title may not show that, but they
oh yeah.
certainly are the keepers of the keys.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about I had a client that I've been working with, and I developed a school program for them. And so it's, like 16 years later after that first school program that I developed, all the lessons learned from that, and just all of the ways in which I built flexibility into that program because I knew, and this happened getting a bus fits 50 kids. That's two classrooms. And you need to consider, do we have space at our site for 50 kids or, 40 kids and a bunch of grown-ups with the kids who are and so, I created this program to have lots of flexibility into group size and, you know, um, we have breaking out into groups, but we could also do it all together, and we make sure we have enough materials so that, we can do a group of 25, but if 50 kids show up, we have enough to do it with 50 kids. And it's definitely, again, that relationship and kind of having a sense, right, of what is possible with the school is going to, like, until you know that, you can't create your program. One of the things that I often do with clients, and I'm going to, in theory, put this in the chat, is this very quick assessment, and you'll actually see this is something that I created because I didn't update it for you all. This is a document. It's called a resource brainstorm, and it kind of very simplistically breaks potential resources at your site down into 4 categories: people, facilities, collections, and money. And this is something I did at NEMA in 2011. So this is 15 years old, but these are still, I think, some of the same questions that folks need to be thinking about in terms of, how many people do you have on your site who can potentially staff a program, and can be trained to run a program? Who's going to be maintaining these relationships with the school in the long term? It can't be the kind of thing where I feel like doing this year, but next year, unless you're planning for passing it off to someone and you have a co-conspirator who's going to take the reins when you are done and are not interested anymore. Consistency is so key with the people part of it, that you kind of can't ignore that, certainly.
Yeah, and on a very simple level is when you're working with somebody and they see your emails, they know your name, and then you have a new staff person come in, which is often happens with us, and they reach out and like, oh yeah, they work with us, email so and so, and their email isn't recognized and they may not, respond to it right away. And that's just because they're used to seeing my name on there and it has to be passed. So you want to include your staff and that kind of turnover or that transition or even who's doing what factors into it. Another thing, you mentioned in your in the handout is money. And I think this also goes back to what we said earlier, like, why are you doing this program? So if it, came from perhaps a board member said, oh, we need to get all the school kids in here, or another person said, yeah, well, if we do field trips, we'll, charge for them and we'll make all this money. I think the realities of our society and our budgets and the kind of organizations we are, money is tight and it does cost somebody something. And not only the money part of it, the time that is taken away. As I said earlier, like how much it will cost them to actually do the field trip. When we talk about the program content creation, I think that, that also factors into how much we can do to make this happen. But we all have collections and they certainly should be shared and they add so much value to the education of our students. Um, Another thing I want to go back to is that you mentioned the facilities, the walkthrough. So you have to think about it from your perspective as a visitor coming in. What are all the points that they're going to touch and see and reach in their visit to the program? And then go backwards even further before they get to that front door. Is there a place for them to park? When they're making the reservation with you to do this program, when you get to that point, does everybody know who's supposed to be on the bus and when? Do you have a telephone number when they're on the bus in case they get lost and you're thinking, where is everybody? So there are a lot of logistical practicalities as well in thinking about a program from your end, but also from their end. How do you make it easier for them? I worked for an organization that had studied this and has it down to a T. I mean, they had an emerged, or I want to say, evolved the staff to make sure that they had somebody answering the phone because that was really needed for people making reservations so they could pick their dates. Other people do it online and get, confirmation sent to them. They have they have a cafeteria where the kids, if they have a long, they want the kids to bring their lunches or the school provides the lunches. Is there some place to store them and a place for the kids to eat, even if it's raining, if you don't have a lot of space?
So,
How are
Susan,
people
I will
moving
say,
through the organizations?
so
Through the
I know you're talking
originally
about the
business.
Songus Industrial History Center because I was sent there when I was starting out as a museum educator. I was working at the Tenement Museum and I got sent up to Songus to kind of look around. And I will say, I walked into the one of the entry spaces where there were all the hooks. There was just hooks everywhere for kids to hang their stuff up, and I was like, they've thought of everything.
Mhm.
Which is not to say that you need to figure out if you're a small organization where to hang up a bunch of hooks for student hoodies and lunch boxes, but it is something that you need to think about. And interestingly, when I was working with our wonderful, and I shout out to the advisory group that we had helping us with planning for all of this, we generated this epic list of things that you need to think about. Um, do you have you need a first aid kit on site, having an EpiPen, if you're working in an outdoor setting, making sure you've communicated to the teacher, like, hey, kids should wear closed-toed shoes because we're going to be walking around outside and no flip-flops. Just a lot of things to think through. And I would recommend, I was kind of thinking through this. If you have a neighboring organization or so, we could potentially make some recommendations through Freedom's Way about an organization to do do a follow along for a field trip from start to finish, and to kind of just get a sense of all of the kind of logistical things you're going to want to think about, and beyond some practical ones, you're going to want to think about physical accessibility, you're going to want to think about language accessibility, you're going to want to think about intellectual accessibility for the kinds of programs that you create. And we do have our session in 2 weeks is going to be all about accessibility. So I hope you come back and join us for that one. We really thought it was a topic that had a lot to explore, that we wanted to give it its own hour. And so, yeah, there's a lot of logistics to think about.
And, and where the bathrooms are located. I
Yeah.
mean, with school groups, there's always going to be somebody that needs to use the restroom or a student, coming that can't sit still and listen to, your guidelines for walking through the certain space. Do you have something that they can hold on to? I mean, sometimes you really have to think on your feet, which we all know that as working with the general public, but certainly with kids at that other level of unexpected. Um,
And again, that's
I
where the
also want to
teacher relationships help because teachers know their students better than anyone. And so they can be a partner in kind of strategizing around those issues as well.
And I want to, give a concrete example is, we just had a meeting with one of our administrators for our after school program, and the students walk to the school. I mean, again, we've evolved that program over the last several years of like what's working, what doesn't work. And at point when the district, when there wasn't money in the budget for busing schools from other I'm sorry, busing students from other schools. We said we're going to continue to work with the school where the students can walk. But we just had a conversation the other day about, we're going to provide umbrellas for them because the students don't always dress or have clothing, for the inclement weather. And that's the thing that makes them, oh, I don't want to go today. It's wet and yucky out. Well, we can buy a half a dozen rain ponchos and that will help them. I mean, it's something as simple as that. I can put that in my budget and feel really special that they're using the FAM things to come down here. The other thing, coming back is that we've also turned back after we've established the relationship and said, we can't take this program on 4 days a week right now until we're adding another staff person, which we just hired, but we need more help, or we don't have security staff when the museum is closed. So we want to, this year can we go to just 2 days a week instead of 4 days a week. So again, once you establish the relationship and you are working with somebody, all those kinds of things come into your your semi, every few months when you get together to talk
of your space or resources. And so certainly share some of those in the chat as well. It's again, I think so much of this work is collaborative, even not just with the schools, but with, across organizations and partnerships and ways that we can support one another in making things happen. And so um, I think so. I think one of the notes I had from our conversations was just approaching this with a spirit of openness, and just open to possibilities of what could be. It doesn't help to walk in with a preset idea of what necessarily you think you should do or want to do. I think the teachers are going to tell you some things, the limitations of your space are going to tell you some things. And then, kind of as we slide over into the actual thinking about program creation, those things are going to inform very much what it is that you end up doing with your teachers and students on either on site. And I saw that I think it was a DAR group in here who goes into classrooms. And that might be you had intended that it would be an on-site school visit, but you realize, the buses or you can't accommodate a full bus load or a whole grade of students. So, okay, we will find a way and we'll come in for a day and see your school and do the program there, and then give kids a pass so that hopefully they come back. And yeah,
I love I'm sorry. I love the comment
yeah.
that Wendy put in the chat. Teachers want more of a fun, hands-on program with games rather than academic or curricular based. That's a great question as we start to think about our content alignment in this section.
Exactly. So, I mean, again, in your kind of research, and this is something I don't have the links here, but we will include those in materials when we post all this stuff, is going to the state curriculum standards, which seem very scary. They're kind of interesting. They're not intimidating, but the state curriculum standards for Massachusetts, and I know we have some folks from New Hampshire as well. They're generally by content areas, so social studies, science, math, and such English language arts will all have their own curriculum standards, which are, it's just a kind of grade by grade progression of what both content in terms of we're learning about the water cycle in fifth grade, which you are learning about the water cycle in fifth grade in Massachusetts, or um, what skills also are you going to be developing? And I think we have, I know from our list of folks attending that we definitely have conservation organizations here. We have a lot of historical societies. I think sometimes art people are like, oh, what do we do? We're art. English language arts. I would say all of the curriculum standards are going to find some way to align with what you have at your site. There's also skill building. So you can talk about content, but there's also skill building. So in Wendy's comments about teachers wanting kids to do things, a lot of times that relates to building skills and kind of the doing of learning. And that's what's exciting about going on a field trip.
And making it fun. That was something back at the Columbus Industrial History Center when we were really looking at our education guidelines. Fun was something the staff said, "You have to make it fun for kids." I mean, they are having fun here, but that is something in our goal as we're determining what are the learning goals that we want to have. That it's got to be fun. And so I agree that you know we don't always have a really tight content tie because we're an art museum, but there are lots of hidden issues and subject matter that we can make connections. And sometimes, if you look at the standards, the other thing to look at is the 21st century, skills that they want students to learn. There's a lot of broader topics there that a visit can help support. the social emotional learning, the critical thinking, all of those really can be should be a big part of the program. And I think also going back to the hands-on, yes, the students. I would say it's a great idea to go visit a school, depending on the grade. How third graders or fourth graders need to transition and move through, focused activity to something hands-on is very different than you're going to get with a seventh grader or an 11th grader. So you really have to know your audience and know the people that are coming in for the experience and design the program around it. Would it, we always try what we're doing and we go through it, and that testing idea of like, is it fun? Can we do this? How do we answer this question? Like you have to walk through it together as your team is building the program as well. To say, gee, that was okay, or that was so much fun. What are the teachers going to think? Well, they should be there with you. They don't always have the time. So again, it comes back to the relationships. How are you testing this? How are you figuring out how you're going to engage your your audience group that is coming through?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think there's the mix of content, what folks are coming to your site because you have unique things that they don't have in a classroom, or you can bring things into their classroom that perhaps um, the teachers don't have access to. Then there's also kind of pedagogy and how we teach. And I think that's also, hopefully you have potentially teachers who are working with your organization or aligned with it who can support you in that, or through your relationships with the classroom teacher, they are going to help you understand like a second grader is going to be capable of doing very different things than a high school student. And so understanding how you're going to create an experience that a second grader is going to, they don't have a fully developed sense of time. So if you're in a historical situation, it doesn't, there's, going over dates is not appropriate for second graders. With high school students, totally appropriate. And so having that teacher to support you in thinking through what you want to do and what's going to kind of really get the kids excited. And I think this is my other big piece of advice, which is less is more. And I know it's particularly hard when you go maybe to a bigger organization like FAM, and you want to see everything. And that's fine. That's a particular type of experience. But if you're there to kind of learn something and do something, you might only focus on two or three pieces of art that you're going to engage in, and then you're going to do an activity, or you're going to, maybe get a quick tour of the house, and then you're going to focus in on one particular object or document or one particular part of the landscape that you're going to be working with. Um, it's so tempting. You love your sites and you love all the things, and you really want kids to see everything and engage with everything. This is like the amuse bouche, where you're just giving them a taste, you're getting them like excited, you're tapping into kind of potential of future engagement.
And you have to meet them as where they're at, which I think is
Absolutely.
key. And the teachers really know their students. They know the possibilities. And I would say the outcome is they're often really surprised and thrilled. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had facilitators, museum teachers, museum guides say that the classroom teachers or the chaperones say that child has never spoken out in class, and here they were blabbing away, so it's wonderful, and they're going to see their students in another light, and it makes it all worth it when you hear a comment like that, or you see a student get so excited that they say they want to bring their family back. Can I bring them back? And that's what makes it all worth it. All of these things they were telling you that sound like it's so much work. It is, but it's fun and it's worth it to catch that, catch
And you
those
know what?
students
I'm
at
going to
those
throw out
big
there,
learning moments.
I'm going to throw out too, not only should it be fun for students, it should be fun for you. I think, when we talked again at the beginning about our motivations, like this is a learning journey that, I mean, again, it's me, the educator, being like, this is going to be a learning journey that your organization is taking on to figure out how to do this. And hopefully it will be fun. And you should approach it with a spirit of, again, openness, but also kind of curiosity about what's possible. And you're going to end up somewhere where you probably never expected you would in the beginning of the process. And that's exactly how it's supposed to work. I know that we are coming up toward our 3 o'clock hour, and I did want to throw it open again, please, if anyone has any questions to throw it into the chat. We are recording this. This is going to be part of something that we'll share out. We also have resources that we're going to provide for each particular topic that we'll be covering in our 3 series sessions. So, links to important stuff that will get you started on your kind of research journey. We're not going to link to all the district websites for every town. I'm pretty sure you all can find those. But in terms of kind of state level resources that you might want to connect into, and also some, graphic organizers. We're going to have a checklist of some of that list that we generated of all the things that you need. And I'm sure there's more. Like, I'm sure if we sat down and like really pulled our hair a little more, we'd come up with more to add to that list. So we'll have all those resources for you to help you out in starting your journey.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth and Susan. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us today. As a reminder, we do have 2 additional webinars coming up in this series. Next Tuesday, the 16th, will be engaging youth and family audiences at your site. And the following Tuesday, September 23rd, we'll be creating accessible experiences for visitors of all abilities. And those registration links were just dropped in the chat. We hope that you can join us or share this with your colleagues and friends. And on another note, Freedom's Way is pleased to share that we will be launching our 2026 Partnership Grants Program on October 1st. And there is a funding category in there to help support the creation and implementation of educational programs. So this may be a good fit for some of your organizations. Unfortunately, though, funding is limited to those organizations who are operating within and serving the 45 communities that we serve in the Heritage area. But the guidelines and information for the upcoming grant program is available now on our website at freedomsway.org/grants. And we encourage you to reach out at any time with questions or ideas. And the best way to reach us is via email at grants@freedomsway.org. And so that concludes today's program, and we wish you well and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.